Imagine standing on a marble terrace. No phone in your hand, no notifications pinging, no deadlines weighing on your mind, no calendar reminding you of tomorrow's obligations. Instead, you're gazing out over the Aegean Sea as the sun rises, painting the water gold and pink. The air smells of salt and wild thyme. Somewhere in the distance you hear the bleating of goats on a hillside and the gentle lap of waves against stone. A breeze carries the scent of olive groves. This is how the ancient Greeks began their days, standing at the threshold between the mortal world and the realm of gods. This was morning. It's 500 BCE, give or take a generation. You're a Greek living somewhere in Athens or Sparta, or one of the countless island communities scattered across the Mediterranean. Physically, you're identical to modern humans. Same hopes, same fears, same capacity for wonder and doubt. But your world, your daily reality, is shaped by something we've mostly lost, a living connection to mythology. The gods weren't abstract concepts or metaphors. They were real, present, woven into every aspect of existence. So here's the question that keeps classicists and historians endlessly fascinated. What were the gods actually doing all day? And more importantly, what did the Greeks think they were doing? See, we have this image burned into our consciousness from countless movies and cartoons. The gods, lounging on Mount Olympus, occasionally tossing thunderbolts, or turning people into trees, spending their time in divine soap operas of jealousy and revenge, distant and capricious, playing with mortals like chess pieces. That's the picture, right? Greek mythology is all grand battles and metamorphoses, tragic heroes and angry deities, epic quests and spectacular punishments. Except it's only part of the story. The ancient evidence reveals something more nuanced, more intimate, more surprisingly mundane. The gods weren't just intervening in world-shaking events, they were everywhere, in everything. They heard prayers whispered at kitchen hearths. They accepted offerings at roadside shrines. They blessed harvests and guided ships and inspired poets and protected travellers. They had personalities, preferences, moods. They got involved in the small stuff, the daily stuff, the stuff that actually mattered to ordinary people living ordinary lives. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Before we can talk about Zeus hurling lightning or Athena whispering wisdom, we need to understand the basics. What did the divine realm actually look like? How did the Greeks imagine their gods spending time when there were no heroes to help, no monsters to create, no wars to influence? When immortality meant something entirely different than the boredom we might expect? The truth is going to surprise you. The gods probably worked more than you'd think. Studies of ancient texts, prayers, hymns, and temple records show that deities were constantly busy. Not with leisure, but with cosmic maintenance. Helios drove the sun across the sky every single day without fail. Persephone managed the cycle of seasons. Poseidon maintained the seas. Hades governed the dead. Hestia kept the sacred flames burning. That's constant, unending work. The rest of the time was spent on what we might call divine administration. Hearing prayers, considering sacrifices, managing their domains, settling disputes, inspiring mortals, and yes, occasionally interfering in human affairs. This flies in the face of everything we imagine about divine ease. We picture the gods as supremely lazy, doing whatever they want whenever they want. But the Greek conception was different. With immortality came responsibility. With power came duty. A god who neglected their role would face consequences, maybe not death, but shame, diminishment, loss of honour among their peers. In many ways, the gods were just as bound by cosmic law as mortals were bound by the gods. If you're listening to this to fall asleep, that's exactly why I make these videos. Maybe subscribe and let me know where are you right now, and what's just outside your window. I always check the comments and it's fascinating. Someone in Athens watching the Acropolis glow at sunset. Someone in London, rain pattering against glass. Someone in New York City, lights blinking like earthbound stars. All drifting off to the same stories about gods, and humans and the spaces between them. The more we study Greek mythology, the more complex and human the picture becomes. Yes, there were petty feuds. Zeus's infidelities were legendary. Hera's revenge was terrifying. Ares loved war for its own sake. Apollo could be vain. Artemis could be merciless. But there was also compassion. Demeter's grief for her daughter was so profound it changed the world. Hephaestus forgave Hera despite her rejection. Dionysus brought joy and liberation. Hermes helped travellers. Athena championed wisdom and justice. The gods, in other words, weren't perfect. They were powerful, yes. Immortal, certainly. But they had flaws, limitations, conflicts, growth. They weren't omniscient or omnipotent. They made mistakes. They learned from them sometimes. They were, in the most fundamental way, relatable. And that's what really matters. The Greeks didn't worship distant perfection. They honoured beings who embodied the full spectrum of existence, light and shadow, creation and destruction, love and wrath, wisdom and folly. So let's walk through a day together. Not a dramatic day with Hercules battling the Hydra, or Odysseus escaping the Cyclops, though those stories matter too. Just a regular day, an ordinary day 2,500 years ago, when the gods woke to their eternal duties and lived their immortal lives in ways that were both utterly divine and strangely, almost absurdly, familiar to the mortals who worshipped them. Because understanding how the Greeks imagined their gods doesn't just teach us about ancient religion. It raises fascinating questions about the present, about what we believe now, what we've gained with monotheism or secularism, and what we might have lost, about whether divinity always means what we think it means. Let's start at the beginning, with that moment when golden dawn breaks over Olympus and another day in paradise begins. Or does it? You're not waking up because you need to. Gods don't need sleep, not really. Sleep is a choice, a luxury, a brief respite from consciousness. But dawn calls anyway. Eos, the goddess of dawn, is already up, spreading her rose-red fingers across the sky. She does this every morning without fail. Has done for eons, will do for eons more. It's her purpose, her identity, her essence. Zeus stirs on his golden throne. The king of gods has responsibilities that begin before most mortals open their eyes. He must consider the day ahead, which prayers will reach him, which sacrifices have been offered, which mortal rulers need guidance or warning or punishment. His mind is vast, containing more thoughts simultaneously than any human could imagine. But he's not all-knowing. He must listen, observe, deliberate. Even omnipotence has its limits. Hera, his wife and queen, is already awake. She's been awake. She's always aware of Zeus's wandering attention, both literal and metaphorical. Her jealousy isn't petty spite, though it can manifest that way. It's something deeper. She's the goddess of marriage, of sacred bonds, and her own marriage is an endless test of those very principles. Every day she must balance her power, her pride, her pain, and her purpose. Athena springs from thought itself, already armoured, already planning. She never truly sleeps. Her mind is too active, too engaged with strategy and wisdom, and the 1,000 ways mortals might improve themselves if only they'd listen. She's the goddess of civilization, and civilization never rests. There are always wars to end justly, crafts to inspire, cities to protect, knowledge to preserve. Apollo is greeting the sun, not because he is the sun, that's Helios, but because he embodies its clarity, its illumination, its truth. He's tuning his lyre, a sound so perfect it makes the very air shimmer. Music, prophecy, healing, poetry, all of these flow from him constantly, gifts he gives the world whether anyone's paying attention or not. Artemis is already in the forest, running with her deer, arrows ready not for cruelty but for sustenance, for balance. She's the wild places, the moon's silver light, the fierce independence that refuses to be tamed. Her day started hours ago in pre-dawn darkness, and it will continue long after sunset. The hunt never ends. Aphrodite rises from her bed of roses and silk, but don't mistake her beauty for laziness. Love is work, constant work. Desire must be kindled and maintained, relationships nurtured or sometimes deliberately broken, hearts opened or carefully guarded. She moves through the world like a fragrance, subtle but inescapable, changing everything she touches. Hephaestus is already at his forge. He might have been there all night. Gods don't tire the way mortals do, and he finds peace in creation. The ring of his hammer on bronze is a prayer in itself. He makes beauty from raw elements, purpose from chaos. Rejected by his mother, mocked for his limp, he responds not with bitterness, but with craft. Every piece he makes is proof that worth isn't measured by perfection of form. Hermes is everywhere and nowhere, as always. He's delivering messages, guiding souls to the underworld, watching over merchants, helping travellers, stealing things just to see if he can, then returning them with a wink. He's movement personified, transition, change, the moment between here and there. Standing still would kill something essential in him. Demeter is in the fields, invisible to mortal eyes but present in every stalk of wheat, every kernel of grain. Her daughter is with Hades for part of the year, and that grief never fully fades. But life continues. The harvest must come. People must eat. Her sorrow and her generosity exist simultaneously, each making the other more profound. Hades sits on his throne in the underworld, and contrary to popular belief, he's not miserable. He's not evil. He's necessary. Someone must maintain order in death, must ensure that souls find their proper places, must keep the boundaries between the living and the dead intact. It's lonely work, but it's essential work. He performs it with a stern kind of compassion. Poseidon rides the waves, feeling every current, every tide, every ship that dares cross his domain. The sea is not separate from him. It is him, and he is vast and moody and magnificent. A fisherman's prayer reaches him. He considers it. Perhaps he'll grant it. Perhaps not. The sea gives what the sea gives. This is the invisible rhythm beneath the visible world. While mortals plant and harvest and build and love and fight and die, the gods are maintaining the cosmic machinery that makes all of it possible. They're not distant or indifferent. They're woven into existence itself. But let's not romanticize too much. The gods also have their petty moments. Zeus eyes a beautiful mortal and immediately begins plotting. Hera notices and begins plotting revenge. Athena and Poseidon argue over who should be patron of Athens, a dispute that will involve a contest and a very confused citizenry. Ares sits in a corner, sulking because nobody's started a good war lately. Dionysus is inspiring a festival that will probably get out of hand. Hermes is stealing Apollo's cattle again because it's funny. The Olympian palace has all the drama of a family dinner, except this family controls thunder and earthquakes and love and death. Arguments echo through marble halls. Alliances form and dissolve. Old grudges resurface. Zeus tries to keep order, but he's often the cause of the chaos. It's exhausting, even for immortals. And yet, through all of this, the work continues. The sun crosses the sky. The seasons turn. Mortals pray and the gods listen. Some of them, sometimes. Sacrifices are offered and accepted or rejected. Heroes are chosen or ignored. Curses are laid and blessings given. The great wheel of fate turns, and even the gods can only influence it, not control it completely. Because here's the secret the myths reveal: the gods are powerful but not omnipotent. They're immortal but not unchanging. They're divine but not distant. They're bound by the same fundamental forces that bind mortals: love, duty, honour, pride, the inescapable consequences of choices made and paths taken. The fates sit apart from Olympus, three sisters weaving the threads of destiny. Even Zeus cannot override their judgments. When they cut a thread, that life ends, mortal or hero, regardless of divine intervention. The gods can ask for favours, can negotiate, can plead, but they cannot command. There are powers older and deeper than even the Olympians. Nyx, the primordial goddess of night, is so ancient and formidable that Zeus himself fears her. Gaia, the Earth Mother, can shake the foundations of heaven if sufficiently angered. The Titans, imprisoned in Tartarus, are not destroyed, only contained, and their power still rumbles beneath the world. The cosmos is layered, complex, full of forces beyond anyone's complete understanding. So what are the gods doing all day? They're working, maintaining the world. They're scheming, pursuing their own agendas. They're loving, fighting, creating, destroying. They're listening to prayers and ignoring them. They're interfering in mortal lives, and remaining frustratingly distant. They're trying to understand their own nature, their own limitations, their own place in a cosmos larger than themselves. But that's not all they're doing. They also sit. They stare into fires that never burn them, and contemplate mysteries that even immortality hasn't solved. They watch mortals struggle with the same questions they struggle with. Who am I? What is my purpose? How do I balance desire and duty? What happens when I fail? They see patterns repeat across generations. They recognize themselves in human stories. They wonder, perhaps, if the distance between God and mortal is really as vast as it seems. They tell stories. Oh yes, the gods tell stories too. On Olympus, they recount the Titanomachy, the war that won them their thrones. They argue about who really deserves credit for which victory. They gossip about each other's affairs. They laugh, actual belly laughs that shake the heavens. They get nostalgic for earlier ages. They worry about the future, because even for gods the future is uncertain. They play. Not just the children, the cupids and nymphs, but the gods themselves. Contests of strength and skill and wit. Apollo and Hermes trade riddles. Athena and Hephaestus compare creations. Dionysus challenges anyone to a drinking contest, which is hardly fair. These games matter. They reinforce hierarchies, settle disputes, burn off the tension that comes from living together in immortal proximity. They create. Every beautiful thing in the mortal world echoes something divine. The Parthenon reflects Athena's perfection. Epic poetry carries Apollo's music. A mother's love for her child channels Demeter's devotion. The gods don't just rule the world, they inspire it, constantly pouring their essence into mortal vessels, hoping some fragment of divine truth will take root and flourish. They rest. Even immortals need moments of peace. Hestia tends her eternal flame, not because it would go out without her, but because the ritual itself is soothing. Demeter walks through her sacred groves, touching each tree, renewing her connection to the earth. Poseidon descends to the quiet depths where even the sea is still. These aren't moments of weakness. They're moments of remembering who they are beyond their roles and responsibilities. Their lives are hard, but not in the way we often imagine. Not a struggle for survival, but something subtler. The burden of consciousness across eternity. The weight of knowing that every choice ripples outward forever. The loneliness of being worshipped but not truly understood. The frustration of watching mortals make the same mistakes over and over. The grief of loving mortals who inevitably die. That last one hits harder than you'd think. The gods fall in love with mortals all the time, and it always ends in sorrow. Death is the one. Or they cannot pass through with their beloved. Zeus loved Semele, and she was destroyed by his glory. Apollo loved Hyacinthus, and a discus killed him. Aphrodite loved Adonis, and a boar gored him. The gods can grant many gifts, but not immortality. Not really. Not without terrible cost. So after all of this, what did the gods actually do all day? They worked, maintaining the cosmic order. They fought, with each other and with ancient enemies. They loved, mortals and each other, with all the complications that brings. They created, pouring divine essence into mortal forms. They listened to prayers and hymns and the unspoken hopes of human hearts. But that wasn't all they did. They also wondered. They stared down from Olympus at the mortal world and asked themselves questions they couldn't answer. Why do mortals persist despite knowing they'll die? What makes a short life meaningful? Is there courage in immortality, or only in facing death? They learned from mortals, which the mortals never suspected. Every hero's choice, every artist's creation, every mother's sacrifice taught the gods something about existence that eternity alone couldn't reveal. When we look back at their days, at the celestial politics and cosmic maintenance and divine dramas, what we see is not an impossible fantasy we can never touch. We see a mirror. The Greeks created gods who reflected human nature amplified, perfected in power, but not in wisdom or virtue. Every god's struggle is a human struggle writ large. Zeus's inability to stay faithful, Hera's pain at betrayal, Athena's frustration when wisdom is ignored, Apollo's grief when prophecy brings no comfort, Aphrodite's understanding that love can hurt as much as it heals. The gods were powerful, but they were not free. They were immortal, but they were not happy. Not always, not completely. They were divine, but they were not distant. They were right there, in the olive groves and city streets, in the sailor's prayer and the poet's inspiration, in the mother's protection of her child and the soldier's courage in battle. They were present. And maybe that's the real answer to what the gods did all day. They were present with mortals in a way that made life meaningful. They provided explanations for the inexplicable, comfort in grief, celebration in joy, someone to blame when things went wrong, and someone to thank when things went right. They made the universe personal. As you lie here listening, you're doing something the ancient Greeks did every night. You're letting the day end. You're stepping away from the demands of mortal life and moving closer to the realm of dreams, which the Greeks understood as a borderland between human and divine. If you've enjoyed this slow journey into myth, You can gently tap like so the algorithm gods know to show you more. You can leave a comment if you'd like. Maybe tell us which Greek god you think you'd be, or which one you'd want to meet, or which myth resonates with you most. It all becomes part of this extended conversation. If you want to walk with us regularly through these quiet corners of mythology, you can subscribe so you don't miss the next story. And if you feel moved to support the channel in a deeper way, there's the option to join as a member. That helps us make more of these long, gentle explorations. It's completely optional. Listening and resting with us is already more than enough. For now, you don't need to do anything at all, just imagine this. The sun is setting on Mount Olympus. The gods are finishing their daily tasks. Helios guides his chariot toward the western horizon. Artemis's moon is rising, silver and serene. Hestia's sacred flame burns steady in the great hearth. The gods gather not for grand council, but for something simpler. To share wine, to tell stories, to remember. Above them, above you, the same stars the ancient Greeks navigated by. The same constellations they named: Orion the hunter, Ursa Major the bear, Cassiopeia the queen. Slightly different positions now, the heavens turn slowly, but still recognisably themselves. 2,500 years ago, a Greek child looked up at those stars and whispered a prayer to Artemis for protection, to Athena for wisdom, to Apollo for healing. Someone reached over, smoothed their hair, promised that the gods were listening. Tonight you share that same human need, to believe in something larger than yourself, to find meaning in mystery, to rest under a sky that holds both science and story. The gods can wait until morning. The myths can wait until morning. For now, you can rest beneath the same ancient stars, where mortals and immortals once shared the heavens, where they still do, if you choose to see it that way. The stars are still there when you open your eyes again, or perhaps you never really closed them. Time works differently in the space between waking and sleeping, between mortal consciousness and divine awareness. The ancient Greeks understood this. They knew that some truths only reveal themselves in twilight, in transition, in the soft places where one state of being dissolves into another. We left the gods at evening, gathering on Olympus as the day wound down. But the divine realm never truly sleeps, and there's more to understand about how immortals fill the endless hours of eternity. More importantly, there's more to discover about the mortals who lived beneath their gaze, who shaped their entire existence around these beings of story and storm and starlight. Because mythology wasn't just tales told around fires, it was lived experience, daily reality, the framework through which an entire civilization understood itself. So let's continue where we left off. Let's step deeper, into this world where gods and mortals weren't separate but interwoven, where the sacred and mundane mixed like wine and water in a crater, where every act could be an offering and every moment might contain the divine. The night on Olympus settles into its rhythm. Most of the major gods have retreated to their own domains, their own pursuits, but the divine household is vast, populated by hundreds of minor deities, spirits and beings, whose names most mortals never learned, but whose influence touched every aspect of existence. These forgotten gods are everywhere, in everything, and their work is perhaps more constant than that of the Olympians themselves. The Horae, goddesses of the seasons and natural order, are already preparing for tomorrow. They mark the hours not with clocks, those don't exist yet, but with a divine sense of cosmic timing that keeps the world running smoothly. One season must give way to the next at precisely the right moment. Too early and crops fail. Too late and the cycle breaks. They carry this responsibility with quiet grace, never celebrated in epic poems, never the subject of great hymns, but absolutely essential. The Muses are awake, as they often are. 9 sisters, each governing a different art. Calliope for epic poetry, Clio for history, Erato for love poetry, Euterpe for music, Melpomene for tragedy, Polyhymnia for hymns, Terpsichore for dance, Thalia for comedy, Urania for astronomy. They don't create art themselves, not exactly. They inspire it, breathing divine fire into mortal minds, turning ordinary humans into channels for something greater than themselves. Right now, somewhere in Greece, a poet is struggling with a line. He's been working on it for hours and the words won't come. He doesn't know that Calliope is watching, waiting, testing his dedication. When he's ready, when he's proven his commitment, she'll whisper the perfect phrase. He'll think it's his own genius. It is, in a way. The Muses only work with those who have the capacity to receive their gifts. But without them, even the greatest natural talent remains mute. The Erinyes, the Furies, those ancient goddesses of vengeance, are tracking a murderer. He killed his brother over an inheritance and thought he'd gotten away with it. He was wrong. The Furies are patient. They don't rush. They drive their prey slowly mad, filling his dreams with blood, making every shadow seem to accuse him, turning his own mind into his prison. Eventually he'll confess. Justice delayed, but never denied. They are older than the Olympians, older than Zeus's reign, older than civilization itself. They remember when justice was simpler, more primal, more absolute. The nymphs are everywhere, scattered across the mortal world. Naiads in every stream and spring, dryads in every tree, oryds in the mountains, nereids in the sea. They're not quite gods, but more than mortal, spirits of place, embodiments of nature's beauty and danger. A traveller stops at a spring to drink. He doesn't see the naiad watching him, but he feels something, a presence, a sense that he's not alone. He pours a libation, just a few drops of wine into the water, a thanks for the gift of refreshment. The naiad smiles. She'll remember his courtesy. Pan is in the wild places as always. Half goat, half god, utterly himself. He's playing his pipes, a haunting melody that drifts through forests and makes travellers' hearts race with inexplicable fear. Panic, they'll call it later, after his name. But it's not malicious. Pan doesn't hate mortals. He's just so utterly other, so completely wild, that encountering him breaks something in the civilized mind. He represents everything that can't be tamed, shouldn't be tamed, the parts of nature and human nature that resist all order. Hecate stands at a crossroads, triple-faced, seeing all directions at once. She's the goddess of magic, of thresholds, of choices that can't be unmade. A woman approaches, desperate, carrying a small bundle of herbs and a prayer written on lead. She wants to curse the woman who stole her husband's affection. Hecate listens. She doesn't judge, not exactly. Magic is neutral. Intention matters, but so does desperation. She accepts the offering, and somewhere across the city someone's luck begins to turn sour. This is the darker side of divine intervention, the gods as tools of human passion, instruments of revenge and desire and the messy, complicated emotions that gods understand all too well because they feel them too. Back on Olympus, in a quiet corner far from Zeus's throne room, Hestia tends her eternal flame. She's the least dramatic of the Olympians, the one who never features in the grand myths. She refused the marriage offers of Apollo and Poseidon, choosing instead to remain virgin, to dedicate herself entirely to the hearth, to home, to the centre that holds everything together. She doesn't speak much. She doesn't need to. Her presence is enough, steady, warm, reliable. When mortals light their household fires, they're lighting a piece of her fire. When they gather their families for meals, she's there in the centre. When they feel safe at home, that's her blessing. The other gods flash and thunder and seduce and destroy. Hestia simply is. And what of the mortals themselves, the humans living their lives under this divine canopy? Let's step down from Olympus now, down from the realm of gods, and walk through Athens on an ordinary night, 500 years before the Common Era began. The city is quieter than it ever gets during the day, but it's not silent. Athens doesn't truly sleep. In the agora, the marketplace, a few late vendors are packing up their stalls. A woman buys the last of the day's bread at a discount, grateful, knowing it'll be stale by morning but her children will eat. She whispers a thanks to Demeter as she tucks the loaves into her basket. It's automatic, unconscious, the way you might say bless you when someone sneezes. The gods are woven into language itself. At a symposium in a wealthy home, men recline on couches drinking wine mixed with water, debating philosophy and politics. The wine is a gift from Dionysus, and they've poured a libation to him before drinking, drops splashed on the floor, an offering. They don't think about it much, it's just what you do, but that small gesture connects them to the divine, acknowledges that pleasure is sacred, that wine is more than fermented grapes, it's transformation, ecstasy, the loosening of tongues and minds that allows truth to emerge. They're arguing about the nature of virtue. One man claims it can be taught, another insists it's innate. A third suggests it comes from the gods, that Athena herself plants wisdom in chosen souls. They'll debate for hours, getting nowhere and everywhere simultaneously. This too is sacred. The love of wisdom, philosophy itself, is under Athena's protection. She doesn't give them answers, that would defeat the purpose. But she blesses the questioning, the rigorous pursuit of truth even when truth remains elusive. In a small home near the city walls, a mother sits by her sick child. The fever has lasted 3 days now, and she's terrified. She's tried everything. Herbs from the market, poultices her grandmother taught her, prayers to Apollo Paeon, the healer. She's promised a votive offering if the child recovers, a small clay model of a leg or arm or whatever body part was afflicted, left at Apollo's temple. It's all she can afford, but the god doesn't measure devotion by wealth, or so she hopes. She prays again, words she's spoken so many times they've become a rhythm rather than language. Please, please, please. The child's fever breaks an hour before dawn. Coincidence? The mother doesn't think so. She'll make that offering, clay-shaped by her own hands, carried to the temple with a grateful heart. In the theatre of Dionysus, carved into the slope of the Acropolis, a playwright sits alone, staring at the empty stage. Tomorrow his new tragedy premieres. He's terrified. What if it fails? What if the audience laughs at the wrong moments, or worse, doesn't react at all? He's poured everything into this play, 3 years of work. He prays to Dionysus, not for success exactly, but for truth. Let the play be worthy of the god. Let it touch something real. Theatre is sacred here, not entertainment but ritual, a communal experience that brings citizens together to explore the deepest questions of existence. The playwright understands his responsibility. He's not just telling a story, he's creating a space where mortals can glimpse divine truth. At the Parthenon, the great temple of Athena towering over the city, a priestess completes the evening rituals. She's been serving the goddess for 20 years, chosen as a young girl for her intelligence and character. Her life is devoted entirely to Athena. No marriage, no children, no life outside this service. Some might see it as a sacrifice. She sees it as a privilege. When she stands before Athena's massive gold and ivory statue, she doesn't feel she's talking to wood and metal. She feels the goddess's presence, vast and terrible and beautiful. Athena is Athens. Athens is Athena. The priestess is the bridge between them, the living link between divine patron and beloved city. Perhaps that's because the Greeks understood something we've partially forgotten. Divinity isn't fair. Nature isn't fair. The universe isn't fair. Earthquakes kill the virtuous and wicked alike. Storms don't ask if you've been good before sinking your ship. Disease doesn't check your moral resume. The gods reflect this reality. They're powerful but not predictable, benevolent but not consistent. They can be petitioned but not controlled. This made them more real, not less. A god who only rewarded virtue and punished vice would be a human invention, a fantasy. The Greek gods, capricious and complicated, felt true because they matched the world mortals actually experienced. And yet, and this is crucial, the myths also show gods learning. Zeus becomes a better king over time. He starts as a serial adulterer who overthrows his father. By the classical period, he's Zeus Olympios, father of gods and men, upholder of justice, protector of the weak. Apollo starts as a somewhat vain youth. He grows into the god of healing and prophecy, learning compassion through his own losses. Even Hera, locked in her bitter marriage, shows moments of genuine nobility, protecting cities, championing heroes who honour her properly. The mortals learn too. The greatest heroes aren't the strongest, but the wisest. Odysseus survives not through strength, but cunning. He learns humility through suffering. He learns that even heroes need divine help, that intelligence matters more than might, that getting home to your family matters more than glory. Penelope waits, and her faithfulness becomes its own form of heroism. Their reunion, after 20 years, after countless trials, is earned. The gods smile on it because it reflects the values they've come to champion: loyalty, endurance, love stronger than time. These aren't just stories, they're templates for living. Every Athenian child learned them, absorbed them, used them to navigate their own lives. When you face a difficult choice, you might think of Orestes, who had to choose between avenging his father and sparing his mother. When you're tempted to hubris, you remember Icarus, who flew too close to the sun despite his father's warnings. When you endure suffering, You think of Heracles and his labours, how even demigods must struggle. The myths provided a vocabulary for human experience, a way to understand and articulate the complexities of existence. They also provided community. The great festivals of Athens, the Panathenaea for Athena, the Dionysia for Dionysus, the Eleusinian mysteries for Demeter and Persephone. These weren't just religious observances, they were social glue, moments when the entire city came together, rich and poor, citizen and metic, old and young, all participating in shared ritual, shared story, shared identity. You belonged to Athens partly because you belonged to Athena. Your citizenship was religious as much as political. And in the quiet moments, in the privacy of your own heart, you could speak to the gods directly. No priest needed, no intermediary required. You could stand in your garden and talk to Apollo as the sun rose. You could whisper to Artemis in the forest. You could ask Athena for wisdom before making a difficult decision. They might not answer, at least not in words, but you could speak. The relationship was open, available, intimate. This is what we've largely lost, this sense of the divine as present, personal, woven into daily existence. We've gained much. Monotheism brought its own profound truths, secularism its own freedoms, but something was traded away. The world became less enchanted, the gods retreated, or we stopped seeing them. Or perhaps they were never there at all, just stories we told ourselves to make sense of a senseless world. The ancient Greeks wouldn't have asked that question. Truth, for them, wasn't confined to literal fact. A story could be true in deeper ways. The gods were real because their influence was real, their presence felt, their lessons vital. As dawn approaches, both in ancient Athens and in your own bedroom thousands of years later, the gods complete their nightly work. Helios prepares his chariot. Eos spreads her rose-red fingers once more. The Horae mark the turning of another day. The nymphs greet the morning in streams and forests. The mortals wake, and their first thought, often, is a prayer. Thank you for another day. Protect my family. Guide my work. Bless this city. Simple words, sincere hearts, the endless conversation between human and divine. You're drifting now, suspended between the ancient world and this one, between story and sleep, between the gods' realm and your own. That's exactly where the Greeks believed wisdom lives, in the between spaces, the thresholds, the moments of transition. Hecate guards those crossroads. Hermes guides travellers through them. Every breath you take crosses a threshold, breathing in, breathing out, life persisting through constant change. The myths continue without you. They continued without the Greeks too, outliving their civilization, their language, their belief. Why? Because they touch something permanent in human experience. We still struggle with pride and humility. We still face impossible choices. We still love and lose and wonder if there's meaning in it all. The gods, real or imagined or something in between, provide one way of wrestling with these eternal questions. So let the gods finish their work. Let them settle into the rhythm of another divine day. Let the mortals below wake and pray and work and love and eventually return to sleep, completing the cycle as they have for millennia. Let the myths continue their endless retelling, each generation finding new meaning, new relevance, new truth in these old stories. You don't need to solve the mystery of whether gods are real. You don't need to believe or disbelieve. You just need to rest now, to let the stories wash over you like waves on an ancient shore, to close your eyes beneath the same stars that witnessed Zeus's rise, and Odysseus's return, and the birth of philosophy in Athenian streets. The gods, if they're watching, understand. Rest is sacred too. Hypnos, god of sleep, spreads his gentle wings. His brother Thanatos, death, waits patiently in the distance. But not tonight, not yet. Tonight there's only sleep, sweet and necessary, the small death that renews us for tomorrow. The Greeks understood this. Sleep isn't emptiness, it's restoration. In dreams, mortals sometimes glimpse divine truth. In rest, the soul repairs itself. Even gods value sleep, choosing it not from need, but from wisdom. So sleep now. The gods will continue their work. The myths will continue their journey through time. The stars will continue their slow wheel across heaven. And you'll wake, eventually, to another day, another chance, another turn in your own ongoing story. That's enough. That's everything. That's what the gods and mortals both discovered, each in their own way. The meaning is in the living, in showing up day after day, in loving what's mortal and temporary, in reaching toward what's eternal and true. Rest well, beneath the gaze of gods who may or may not be there but whose stories remain, lighting our way through the dark,